están? Y bienvenidos a una nueva entrevista de Carta Política. El tema que vamos a ver hoy van a ser las elecciones en Malasia. Malasia es un país del sudeste asiático que va a celebrar sus elecciones generales el próximo 19 de noviembre, este sábado, nada más. Y nos vamos a juntar con un amigo, Alex Irvin Joseph, de Malasia, que nos va a estar explicando algunas cosas respecto a las elecciones en su país. ¿Cómo andas, Alex?
Hola Felipe, de Carta Política. Estoy muy contento de estar en este programa, pero bien por acá. Estoy bien.
Nos alegra mucho tenerte acá con nosotros, Alex. Oh, this interview will be in English again. Okay. Alex, what is vote in Malaysia on 19 November? Can you briefly describe the Malaysian political system?
So this 19th of November, so this Saturday, Malaysians will be having a polling day or voting day known as the 15th general election for our Malaysian. So in Malay, general election, we really said it in Pilihan Raya Umum ke-15. So that's how it was said in Malay. So general election is done at least every 5 years, more or less. And with the new rules that were just implemented, Malaysian citizens at the age of 18 are now eligible to vote, and the registrations to apply for vote is automatically and through online. Unlike previous general elections, which can only be voted by citizens over the age of 21. And the registrations back then to vote was done manually and physically. So the political system practices in Malaysia, it is quite complex. So it consists of constitutional monarchy, parliamentary democracy, and federation. It can be quite complex, as I said just now, but I'll put it in easier words. The first one, constitutional monarchy. So Malaysia has 9 kings or sultan, and one of those 9 kings will be the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, sort of like king of kings. And it will be rotated every 5 years. Although we have monarchy, but the power of monarchy is not absolute, and the power is determined by the federal constitution. Secondly, parliament democracy is where the people select their representation in their voting areas or constituency to the parliament, and the members of parliaments will become cabinets. Thirdly, the federation. Federation is a system that divides and distributes the power between the federal government and the state government. So talking about general election this Saturday, November 19, it is on the federal level. So on federal level, Malaysia is divided into 222 voting areas called constituency. Each of these areas elect their own members of parliament, or I will say MP, all on the same day throughout the whole nation. So basically, candidates with the most votes will become the MP of the constituency. And then the coalition that wins more than half, at least 112 seats in parliament, wins and forms the federal government. Thus, the leader will become the prime minister. So in a nutshell, Malaysian political system uses or follows the Westminster parliamentary system and is categorized as a representative democracy. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. And I understand that the racial issue is very present in Malaysian politics. Malays, Indians. What can you tell us about this?
So since Malaysia is a multiracial country, for instance, these three majority races, Malay, Chinese, and Indian, followed by the natives or indigenous of Sabah and Sarawak. Hence, there are many political parties that represent each race in Malaysia. So most of the race-based parties from alliance under BN or Barisan Nasional. Meanwhile, multicultural parties, parties that involve more than one races, but it's not about races, but more to like community in certain places, something like that. So does exist? That one does exist, and form alliance under the opposition, now known as PH or Pakatan Harapan. So there are other political camps that is a mixture of both multiracial and one race dominated, and also religion based, not to forget. There are lots of mixtures of parties. So racial sentiments are often played by the conservative and nationalist side of the political spectrum. But the thing is, with race-based party still exist and still center stage in Malaysian politics nowadays. Because I just read recent reports from the CAN that it is stated that the split in the Malay votes will leave the electoral race wide open, with no one coalition likely to win a simple majority in the polls. Plus, top on the minds of Malay voters in rural heartlands is the issue of Malay supremacy, especially on privileges surrounding race, religion, and also royalty. So finding a candidate who will represent their interests is therefore a priority for them. But there was also parties that were once a one-race parties, but now has changed their ideas and the definitions into multiracial party. So one of the examples that I can think of, which is in my own state, Sabah, is called UPCO, UPKO. Initially, UPCO stands for, you gotta be ready for this. UPCO stands for United Pasok Momogun Kadazan Organization. Pasok Momogun se dice, significa nativo, indigenous, something like that. Kadazan is one of the major race in Sabah. So, which was one race domination parties actually. So later on, they changed the name into United Pasok Momogun Kadazan Dusun Rungus Organization, in which it adds two more new major races, major ethnics in Sabah. And now they have finally changed its views and ideas into United Progressive Kinabalu Organization with the same acronym UPKO, in which Kinabalu is the name of the biggest mountain in Sabah and Malaysia. And also that covers all the natives of the Sabahan people for the Sabah people and their rights. Because the politicians saw the flaws between within their one race party, previously in which it only benefits the Kadazan people but disregards or have minimal advantages to others, hence not benefiting Sabah people as a whole. Yeah, that's my point.
We have a lot of parties. They change their names. Amazing. The last about it. So, what about the main political parties? You mentioned Barisan Nasional, Pakatan, other parties for this election.
So for the upcoming election that will be done this 19th of November, there are four main political camps that will take part in this election, which includes Gerakan Tanah Air, the first one, Gerakan Tanah Air, or GTA, which is an ultra-nationalist party led by Dr. Mahathir. The second one is Parti Perikatan Nasional, PN, that will be led by Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, an Islamic nationalist. The third one is Barisan Nasional, BN, a conservative party led by Datuk Seri Zahid Hamidi, and the fourth one, which is Pakatan Harapan, with progressive leaning led by Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. So now there are four main political parties instead of just two back then. Yeah, there have emerged two more parties, more choices for the voters to vote.
So in the last election in 2018, there was the first government change in Malaysia after 60 years of government of the Barisan Nasional. What has happened since then?
All right. So before that, the last election was in 2018. So it was the collapse of the Barisan Nasional, or BN, government, which had led the country for 6 decades since few years after the the Malaysia was formed, and it has finally been replaced with a new government called PH, Pakatan Harapan. So 2018 was the time where the new Malaysians cheered for the new government. And in addition to that, there has been so many political parties and coalitions emerged. So what happened after that was the government was elected under Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir. So he became Prime Minister for the second time, that led the country for 22 months before it fell apart due to internal division within Pakatan Harapan, or PH, and defection by some of its member of parliament. A new coalition named PN, Perikatan Nasional, took over and formed the new government in 2020. There were numbers of citizens that were not in favor for the new government after PH, because they said that they didn't vote for Perikatan Nasional in the first place. And certainly, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin was the first prime minister ever in Malaysia whom was not elected under general elections. But one thing's for sure, during the hardship of pandemic, the prime minister set aside all those politics. He sets aside all those political issues to focus on overcoming the COVID-19 situation. But along with that, he is also advised Yang di-Pertuan Agong, YDPA, to issue a proclamation of emergency that lasts for 8 months in 2021. This has caused the executive authority of the federal government to not withstanding anything in the federal constitution, and extends to all matters under the legislative authority of the state, except for certain matters that relates to Islamic law, Malay customs, or any native laws or custom in Sabah and Sarawak. So in easier words, or in summary, the YDPA or authorized personnel may take temporary possession of all or any parts of the powers and lands. A new special committee was formed. Parliament and the State Legislative Assembly will not sit until the end of emergency period, and no general elections, state election, and by-election will be held during this period. So his thought on this was pretty clear, pretty transparent, to overcome the outraging number of COVID-19 cases after what happened in Sabah back in 2020. That caused the second wave of COVID-19 outbreak. In the other hand, many reactions were shown by various parties who described it as an attempt to inhibit democracy and an attempt to stay in power. It becomes vivid when the emergency period seems failed to contain the COVID-19. In fact, the cases continue to peak at 4 times higher than previous highest cases recorded way before the proclamation of emergency is declared. So also at this period, protests and demonstrations was held to demand the resignation of Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin on July 31st of 2021. It was a protest organized by a coalition of youths and civil society groups. This coalition was also calling for a full parliamentary sitting and to end the emergency period as soon as possible.
So we have a very complex electoral system, and for parties, protests, the emergency, all you say, is the government expected to win this election?
Well, for me, in my point of view, it would be a tough election for both of the government and the opposition. It is most likely that none of the political coalition could gain enough seats to form the government and could lead to a hung parliament. So a compromised government is more likely to happen. However, with the increasing number of new voters, especially with the new rules that enables people at the age of 18 to vote. So some speculates that PH Pakatan Harapan could win with a slim majority because that PH is so inclusive to the youth, and yeah, their manifestos are including the youth itself, that they really get into the youth, not only the elderly people, not only the government servants or civil workers, but also the youth of today, that they approach as what I was experiencing towards these past few weeks, because PH seems done a lot of work for these past few weeks. So yeah, I do believe on that. So yeah, PH for me. I have no idea, but yeah, that would be the one.
What is the attitude of the youth toward politics? How do you see the political environment in the youth?
The general election back in 2018 shows that there were a huge percentage of young voters, although young voters as young as 21 years old were eligible to vote back then, not as early as 18 years old as compared to what we will be doing this November 19th. But based on the statistic, yeah, there are huge percentage of young voters did participate in the election. So therefore, it can be said that Malaysian youth are serious about who will govern the country, although some of them are undecided about who they should vote. And as new parties emerge during this time of post-pandemics, one of the most influential parties that I can think of, that I can think of that really incorporates youth within the politics is MUDA. MUDA is short for Malaysian United Democratic Alliance, pero la letra MUDA significa joven, so it means young. So MUDA is a party which created by Yang Berhormat Syed Saddiq, a former Minister of Youth and Sports of Malaysia back then. So this is a party which led by youth, since there's been almost all of the parties that being led by elder generations. So the late millennials and early Gen Zs are passionate on leading this country with the relevance of what the country and the people want, hence making Malaysia to be a greater place and a progressive thinking system in Malaysia. Yeah.
So the last question. In Malaysia, there are reports of electoral irregularities and other political problems, repression, censorship. Can we say that Malaysia is a democracy?
We can say Malaysia is democracy, but there's a little bit onto it. So one of the main issues raised is gerrymandering. This happened in 2013, where opposition gained 51% of the vote, but still unable to form the government. However, with the fall of BN during 2018, we can say that democracy still works in Malaysia. Although there's a lot of flaws within the system itself, this system itself. So the censorship and repression no longer works with the increase of social media usage by the voters. But however, in rural areas, repression, I can say that it is still exists by blocking other parties' effort to campaign against them, even until today. So there are still parts of the there are still parts of Malaysia which specifically in the rural areas where they had hard reach of internet connection, or like it is not really a good place to go. And I can say that it's really hard to reach to the rural places. So there are lots of problems that went there. I mean, like, it would be, how to say this, repression does still exist, where there's one party that are able to go into the rural areas, but the other parties, they just can't. They don't have, like, transportation, a good transportation to travel to the rural area and to to share their manifestos to the people inside there.
The urban.
That's that.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for these minutes. So if you have some final reflection to end this.
Okay, no matter what the result is, this election will surely shift the country's political landscape from two-party system back then, how it used to be only two-party systems, to now to be four-party system, and the need of political negotiation in order to form a new government is really needed. Hence, post-pandemic events seems to open the eyes to many Malaysians, especially youth of today, in choosing the best and responsible candidates to govern our country. So from 2018 to 2021 itself, Malaysia has indeed made history by having three prime ministers from three different governments, Pakatan Harapan, Pakatan Nasional, and also Barisan Nasional in a single term. So as from my point of view, there would be no progress to the country if even after several government changes, if there are still ministers who jump off of the previous parties to new government form party, like how it has already been since back then, the minister would be the same, the system will be stay as it is. There's no progression towards Malaysia as a developed nation. But with new generation that has finally eligible to vote and to think that which candidate that can make Malaysia a progressive country as early as 18 years old that can vote nowadays, this generation seems to have a hope for a brighter future of Malaysia. So the power is in the people's hand in order to elect the most suitable candidate to lead this country progressively, along with the changes of era, time, and methods on leading Malaysia. That's all for me.
Muchas gracias, Alex.
De nada, muchísimas gracias a vos.
Bueno, este fue Alex Irvin Joseph, proveniente del estado de Sabah, Malasia. Muchas gracias por estos minutos, por esta entrevista, y muchas gracias a todos los que nos están viendo y a todos los que nos van a ver. Con esto cerramos esta nueva entrevista de Carta Política. Les recuerdo que pueden seguirnos en Twitter como @politicacarta o en Instagram como Carta Política. Los invitamos a suscribirse a nuestro canal de YouTube y nos estaremos viendo en futuras entrevistas. Muchas gracias.